I stood frozen in the back of the packed conference hall, watching as Dr. James Chun clicked to the next slide in his presentation. My slide, my data, my 3 years of painstaking research displayed in a graph I had meticulously designed. As you can see, he said confidently to the room of leading oncology researchers, these results demonstrate a significant reduction in tumor growth using our novel peptide delivery system. R? There was nothing R about it. This was my delivery system, my experimental design, my sleepless nights optimizing the peptide sequence. Yet my name was nowhere on the title slide, relegated instead to a barely visible mention in the acknowledgments, alongside the lab technicians and administrative staff. I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. A text from my colleague Priya. Is he seriously presenting your research? The room erupted in applause as Dr. Chin took questions from the audience. Distinguished researchers were standing, excited about the breakthrough, my breakthrough. One even called it potentially the most significant advancement in targeted drug delivery this decade. I slipped out of the conference room before the Q&A ended, my vision blurred with tears of rage and frustration. In the empty hallway, I leaned against the wall, trying to steady my breathing. 3 years of my life, my reputation, my future in science, all stolen in a 40-minute presentation. My phone vibrated again. Another text from Priya. Emma, Dr. Rivera is looking for you. The Dr. Catherine Rivera. I froze. The editor-in-chief of the most prestigious journal in our field was looking for me? Now? As Chun continued answering questions with MY knowledge, a dangerous thought formed in my mind. There might still be a way to reclaim what was mine, but it would mean risking everything I had left. What I didn't know then was that the next 24 hours would either end my scientific career forever or change the course of cancer research history. 6 months earlier, I was Dr. Emma Wright, a rising star in cancer research at Peyton Institute. I'd been recruited directly after my postdoc at Johns Hopkins, where my dissertation on nanoparticle drug delivery had won the university's Innovation Award. Peyton had offered me generous lab resources and relative autonomy, a researcher's dream. For 2 years, everything had progressed perfectly. My team was small but dedicated. 2 brilliant graduate students, a lab technician, and occasionally an undergrad intern. We were developing a peptide-based system that could potentially deliver cancer drugs directly to tumor cells while sparing healthy tissue, the holy grail of cancer treatment. Our preliminary results were promising. So promising that the Institute's quarterly review board had highlighted our work as one of their breakthrough initiatives. I was on track for my first major publication as principal investigator, with potential for significant grant funding to follow. Then Dr. Edward Reynolds retired, and Dr. James Chun was appointed as our new department head. I still remember our first department meeting after his arrival. He went around the room, asking each PI to summarize their current projects. When my turn came, I concisely explained our peptide delivery system and recent results. Interesting, he said, his expression unreadable. But have you considered the immunogenic response problem? That's been the downfall of similar approaches. Yes, actually, I replied, if you look at our latest data, we've modified the terminal sequence specifically to address that. We've seen a 78% reduction in immune activation compared to the control. He nodded without making eye contact and moved on to the next researcher. It seemed like a minor interaction at the time. I even appreciated what appeared to be thorough scientific inquiry. I didn't recognize it as the first move in a carefully orchestrated game. Over the following weeks, I noticed subtle changes. My requests for additional equipment were delayed. 2 promising graduate students who had applied to join my lab were redirected to other projects. My time slots for using the advanced imaging facility were repeatedly rescheduled. When I raised these issues with Dr. Chin, his responses were always reasonable on the surface. We need to distribute resources based on project viability. Those students' backgrounds weren't optimal for your specific work. The imaging schedule had to be adjusted for the department's priorities. Then came the budget review. Dr. Chin informed me that my research line was being reduced by 30% in the next quarter. We need to make some hard decisions about resource allocation, he explained, sliding a spreadsheet across his desk. Your preliminary results are interesting, but we haven't seen the translational potential that would justify the current funding level. Translational potential? We've demonstrated targeted delivery in 3 different cancer cell lines, I argued. The therapeutic implications are enormous. The data is promising but preliminary, he countered. The department needs to focus on more established research paths with clearer commercial applications. I left his office stunned. That evening, I discovered that while my budget was being cut, a new project had appeared on the department roster, led by Dr. Chin himself. Its focus, peptide-based drug delivery systems for cancer treatment. The next morning, I marched into his office. You started a project practically identical to mine, I said, placing the research summary on his desk. He leaned back in his chair. Similar area, yes, but with a substantially different approach. The Institute can't put all its eggs in one basket. Different approach? The methodology is nearly identical to what I presented at the last review. Dr. Wright, he said with a thin smile, this field didn't begin with your research. These are standard techniques that any competent lab would employ. Before I could respond, his phone rang. He held up one finger, indicating our conversation was over, and answered the call. The systematic undermining continued. My lab space was reduced to accommodate department expansion. My most talented graduate student, Marcus, was offered a special fellowship to join a collaborative project Dr. Chen's new lab. Weekly research meetings were rescheduled to conflict with my teaching hours, meaning I often missed critical discussions where resources and opportunities were allocated. I wasn't the only one who noticed. My colleague Priya, who ran the genomics lab down the hall, stopped by one evening as I was working late. Emma, what's going on with Chen? He's presenting your peptide data in departmental emails like it's coming from his group. I showed her the latest research summary that had been circulated, my work repackaged with slight terminology changes and no attribution. This is academic theft, she said bluntly. You need to report this. But to whom? Dr. Chin was the department head. His boss was the institute director, Dr. Lawrence, with whom he played golf every weekend. The academic world was small, and Chen had connections at every major research university and journal. One call from him suggesting I was difficult or not a team player could end my career before it truly began. Still, I tried the proper channels. I scheduled a meeting with our institute's ombudsperson, carefully documenting the pattern of behavior and the appropriation of my research. She listened sympathetically and promised to look into the situation. 3 weeks later, I received a vague email about improving communication within departments and clarifying attribution protocols. No specific actions, no acknowledgement of the actual problem. Meanwhile, Dr. Chen's lab grew. He received a major equipment grant for technology that my proposal had specified months earlier. The Institute's newsletter featured his new project, describing it as pioneering and innovative words that had been used to describe my work before his arrival. The final blow came when Marcus, my former student, stopped by my reduced lab space one evening. Dr. Wright, he said, clearly uncomfortable, I thought you should know. Dr. Chin is submitting an abstract to the National Cancer Conference next month. It's your peptide delivery system. My stomach dropped. How much of my work is he using? Marcus looked at the floor. All of it. The core design, the testing methodology, the cell line results. He's added some minor modifications to the peptide sequence, but it's your system. And you're part of this. I couldn't keep the hurt from my voice. I've been trying to make sure your contributions are acknowledged, he said defensively. But he's the PI on paper now. He controls the narrative. After Marcus left, I sat alone in my lab, surrounded by the equipment I had selected, the protocols I had developed, the partial results of experiments I might not get to complete. 3 years of work, potentially reduced to a footnote in someone else's career. That night, I considered my options. I could, 1, resign and try to start over somewhere else, abandoning years of work. 2, file a formal ethics complaint, likely triggering a protracted battle I might not win. 3, stay and fight quietly, documenting everything while trying to salvage what I could of my research. None seemed promising. I barely slept. The next morning, I received an email that initially seemed like the final insult. Dr. Chin was requesting that I prepare a comprehensive report on all experimental protocols and results from my peptide project for departmental documentation purposes. Essentially, he wanted me to hand over everything. But as I stared at the email, a different perspective emerged. This wasn't just another power play, it was evidence. He was creating a paper trail of his knowledge gap. If he truly understood the research he was claiming as his own, he wouldn't need my protocols. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. There was a fourth option. I could prove definitively that this was my work by demonstrating that he didn't understand its fundamental aspects. I began meticulously documenting every interaction, saving emails, recording meetings when legal. I prepared the requested report, minus several critical details that would be obvious to anyone who had actually done the work. I included complex technical language that obscured rather than clarified the methodology, wondering if he would notice the deliberate omissions and obfuscations. He didn't. The report was accepted without question. Meanwhile, I worked nights and weekends on a critical experiment that would definitively prove the efficacy of my approach. I used equipment in Priya's lab when mine wasn't available. I recruited an undergraduate who needed research experience to help with the time-consuming cell cultures. I leveraged every resource and connection I had left. As the date of the conference approached, I completed the crucial experiment, one that demonstrated not only that my delivery system worked, but optimized it beyond what Dr. Chin had seen in the data he'd appropriated. This wasn't just replicating previous results. This was extending them in a way that proved my intimate understanding of the system's mechanisms. And then came the conference. I watched from the back as Dr. Chin presented my life's work as his own. I listened as he stumbled through technical questions, providing vague answers that revealed his superficial understanding. I noticed the moments when he glossed over methodological details he clearly didn't comprehend. After fleeing the presentation room, I found myself in an empty corridor, leaning against the wall, wondering if my career in science was over. Dr. Wright. I turned to see Dr. Catherine Rivera, editor-in-chief of the Journal of Experimental Therapeutics and a legend in cancer research. Dr. Rivera, I said, quickly wiping my eyes. It's an honor to meet you. I found your recent paper on nanoparticle delivery quite impressive, she said. That's why I was surprised to see such similar work being presented just now without significant acknowledgement of your contribution. My heart raced. You notice that? I review hundreds of papers a year, Dr. Wright. I recognize intellectual lineage. She paused. And I recognize when something doesn't add up. Dr. Chen's presentation left several methodological questions unanswered, questions I suspect you could answer. I took a deep breath. I could, because it's my research. I developed that peptide delivery system over the past 3 years. I can prove it. Dr. Rivera studied me for a moment. The keynote panel has an unexpected opening tomorrow morning. Would you be prepared to present your latest results, the actual results, with complete methodology, if I arrange it? The next morning, I stood at the podium facing a room of the world's top cancer researchers. My hands trembled slightly as I loaded my presentation, not the one Dr. Chin had given, but one containing my complete research journey, including the breakthrough results from my recent experiment. Good morning, I began. I'm Dr. Emma Wright from Peyton Institute, and I'd like to share with you the development and optimization of a novel peptide delivery system for targeted cancer therapeutics. As I presented, I noticed Dr. Chin slip into the back of the room, his face darkening as he realized what was happening. I continued methodically, explaining each step of the development process with the intimate knowledge that comes only from having done the actual work. During the Q&A, a researcher asked about a specific technical challenge, one that Dr. Chen had fumbled in his presentation. "That's an excellent question," I said, and proceeded to give a detailed explanation of how we had overcome that particular hurdle, complete with the failed approaches that had led to our eventual solution. The kind of details only the true architect of the research would know. By the end of my presentation, the room was buzzing with excitement and confusion. Two different researchers from the same institute had presented essentially the same work, but with starkly different levels of understanding. Dr. Rivera moderated the final questions, ending with one of her own. "Dr. Wright, this work represents a significant advancement in targeted delivery systems. Could you clarify the collaborative structure of this project, given that Dr. Chen presented related findings yesterday?" The room went silent. This was the moment of truth. While Dr. Chen is my department head, this research originated in my laboratory 3 years ago, I said carefully. I designed the peptide delivery system, developed the testing methodology, and generated the primary data. I have complete laboratory notebooks, time-stamped digital records, and witness testimony documenting the development process. I paused, meeting Dr. Chen's glare from the back of the room before continuing. Scientific advancement depends on proper attribution and intellectual honesty. I'm happy to collaborate with colleagues, but accurate recognition of contributions is fundamental to the scientific process. The implications were clear without making direct accusations. After the session, several researchers approached me with questions and collaboration offers. Dr. Rivera introduced me to colleagues from major cancer centers. The editor of Nature Therapeutics handed me his card, suggesting I submit my work as soon as possible. Dr. Chen was notably absent from these conversations. When I returned to the institute the following week, I found a message requesting my presence at the director's office. Dr. Lawrence, the same director who played golf with Dr. Chen every weekend, was waiting with a serious expression and a folder of documents. "Dr. Wright, we have a situation that requires immediate attention," he began. "It appears there's been a significant breach of our research integrity protocols." My heart sank. Was I about to be scapegoated? He continued, "Following your presentation at the conference, several distinguished colleagues contacted me with concerns about potential research appropriation within our institute." He slid a paper across his desk, a formal ethics investigation notice with Dr. Chen's name at the top. "The board has temporarily reassigned Dr. Chen's administrative duties, pending a full investigation," Dr. Lawrence explained. "In the meantime, we'd like you to continue your peptide delivery research with restored funding and additional resources." I sat in stunned silence. "Dr. Wright," he added, "the Institute's reputation depends on research integrity. We should have listened sooner when concerns were raised." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was an acknowledgement. 1 year later, I stood in my expanded laboratory, watching my team, now 6 graduate students and 2 postdocs, work on various aspects of our peptide delivery system. Phase 1 clinical trials were being planned in collaboration with Memorial Sloan Kettering. Our paper in Nature Therapeutics had been cited over 100 times already. Dr. Chen had resigned during the ethics investigation, accepting a position at a pharmaceutical company with considerably less prestige than Peyton Institute. The scientific community has its own way of acknowledging misconduct, even when formal proceedings are confidential. More importantly, I had established the Right Initiative for scientific mentorship, focused particularly on supporting women and underrepresented minorities in research fields. We provided resources on documenting work, navigating attribution conflicts, and building support networks. My office door opened, and Priya poked her head in. "Ready? The mentorship panel starts in 10 minutes. I nodded, gathering my notes. Today's topic was maintaining scientific integrity in competitive environments, something I now had unique experience to share. As we walked toward the auditorium, A young researcher approached me hesitantly. Dr. Wright? I'm starting my postdoc next month, and I just wanted to say, your story made me feel like there's still integrity in science. That truth eventually matters. I smiled, remembering how close I had come to giving up. The truth does matter, I told her, but it needs champions willing to stand up for it. Sometimes you have to make yourself visible when others try to make your contributions invisible. We continued to the auditorium, which was filled with early career scientists, each with their own research dreams, each facing their own potential challenges. I took my place at the panel table, no longer invisible, ready to share what I had learned about perseverance, documentation, and the courage to claim your rightful place in science. The moderator introduced me, our next speaker, Dr. Emma Wright, will discuss how to protect your research and ensure proper attribution in collaborative environments. As I began to speak, I realized that what had once been the most painful experience of my career had transformed me into exactly the mentor and advocate I had needed during my darkest moments. Sometimes the greatest contributions aren't just the discoveries we make in the lab, but the paths we clear for those who follow. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.